The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. Dorothy Gale lived in the middle of the great Kansas prairie with her Uncle Henry and Aunt Em. Their house was small, with 4 walls, a floor, and a roof. Inside were a rusty-looking cook stove, a cupboard for the dishes, a table, 3 or 4 chairs, and 2 beds. When Dorothy stood in the doorway and looked around, she could see nothing but the great gray prairie on every side. Only Dorothy's little dog Toto kept her from turning as gray as her surroundings. One day, while Dorothy was playing with Toto, a great cyclone came, twisting and tearing across the flat land. Frightened, Toto hid under the bed, and Dorothy ran to save him. Then, a strange and scary thing happened. The cyclone tore right over the house. The twister lifted the house up, higher and higher, up into the air and away. Finally, with a lurch and a bump, the cyclone set the house down in the midst of a marvelous land. Unlike in Kansas, the grass was lush and green. There were banks of gorgeous flowers and stately trees whose branches were filled with birds with rare and brilliant plumage. Dorothy was greeted by an old lady and 3 oddly dressed little men. "Welcome to Oz, noble sorceress," said the old lady. "I am the Good Witch of the North. Thank you for killing the Wicked Witch of the East and freeing the Munchkin people." "But there must be some mistake," said Dorothy. "I have not killed anyone." "Perhaps you didn't, but your house did," replied the Good Witch. "Oh dear," said Dorothy sadly, "and I just want to go home." "Well then, my dear, you must follow the yellow brick road to the Emerald City and see the great Wizard of Oz. He will help you find your way home." And before she disappeared, the Good Witch gave Dorothy the Wicked Witch's enchanted silver slippers. Dorothy changed into a clean dress and put on her new silver slippers, finding they fit just like they were made for her. Waving goodbye to the Munchkins, she set out along the road of yellow bricks. After a while, she saw a scarecrow placed high on a pole in a great cornfield. To her amazement, the scarecrow blinked and greeted her. "Good day," said the scarecrow in a husky voice. "Did you speak?" asked the girl in wonder. "Certainly," answered the scarecrow. "How do you do?" "I'm well, thank you," replied Dorothy politely. "How do you do?" The scarecrow told Dorothy he was tired of being pecked at all day, and what he wanted most in the world was to have brains so that nobody could call him a fool. Dorothy helped the scarecrow down from his pole and asked him to join her. Perhaps in the Emerald City the wizard could help them both. As the new friends traveled onward, the path became uneven, and the walking grew so difficult that the scarecrow often stumbled over the yellow bricks. The farther they went, the more dismal and lonesome the country became, and the trees on either side of the road became thicker and more gnarled. To their amazement, in this mysterious forest they found a man made entirely of tin, rusted into place while trying to cut down a tree. They found his oil can and oiled his joints so he could move and talk again. "Once I was a normal man, and in love with a beautiful Munchkin girl," explained the Tin Man. "But the Wicked Witch didn't want us to be happy, and cursed my axe, causing me to chop off my limbs, so I had to replace them with tin. Now that I am made of tin, I cannot love any more. If only I had a heart, I could return to her and be happy again." "Join us," said Dorothy. "Perhaps the great Wizard of Oz will be able to give you a heart." So the Tin Man shouldered his axe, and together the 3 walked on into the darkening forest. All at once, they heard a terrible roar. A great lion bounded into the road, and with one blow of his mighty paw, he sent the scarecrow and Tin Man spinning. Then the lion saw Toto, growling and barking. The lion snapped at him. Fearing nothing for her own safety, Dorothy rushed forward and slapped the lion upon his nose as hard as she could. "Don't you dare bite Toto! You ought to be ashamed of yourself, a big beast like you trying to bite a poor little dog!" shouted Dorothy. Immediately all the anger went out of the lion. "I didn't bite him," cried the lion, and he rubbed his sore nose. He wiped a tear from his eye and said, "I am a terrible coward.
I learned that if I roared very loud, everyone was frightened and got out of my way."
Seeing that the lion wasn't so scary after all, the friends explained their journey.
"Perhaps the wizard can give me courage," the lion purred,
and he asked if he could accompany them. Once more, they set off on their journey, Dorothy skipping in her silver slippers, the Scarecrow stumbling on the uneven bricks, the Tin Man clanking along, and the lion walking in stately strides at their side. As they traveled through the gloomy forest, the lion told them of the deadly Kallidas.
"They're monstrous beasts with bodies like bears and heads like tigers. I'm terribly afraid of them."
Just then, a distant roar made them look behind them. To their horror, 2 of the great beasts were after them. The friends started to run, but soon came to a chasm that crossed the road. "What shall we do?" asked Dorothy despairingly. "We cannot fly, that is certain. Neither can we climb down. Therefore, if we cannot jump over, we must stay here and be eaten," said the Scarecrow.
"I think I could jump over,"
said the lion after measuring the distance carefully in his mind. And with great bounding leaps, the lion sprang across the giant trench, carrying each of the travelers until they were all safely on the other side. Soon they came out of the dark forest into a great meadow filled with wildflowers. The ground was carpeted with them, great clusters of scarlet poppies so brilliant in color they dazzled Dorothy. "Aren't they beautiful?" the girl asked as she breathed in the spicy scent of the bright flowers. But Dorothy didn't know that when there are many of these flowers together, their odor is so powerful that anyone who smells them falls asleep and, if the sleeper is not carried away, sleeps on and on. The Scarecrow and Tin Man, not being made of flesh, were not troubled by the scent of the flowers, but Dorothy, the lion, and Toto gradually slowed down. Their eyes grew heavy, and one by one they slumped to the ground. "We can carry Dorothy and Toto, but the lion is much too heavy for us to move," lamented the Scarecrow. As they were pondering what to do with the sleepers, there came a low, soft growl from among the flowers. Suddenly, a great yellow wildcat, red eyes glowing like balls of fire, sprang from among the flowers. As it came nearer, the Tin Man saw that running before the beast was a little gray field mouse, and although he had no heart, he knew it was wrong for the wildcat to try to kill such a pretty, harmless creature. With one mighty chop, the Tin Man dispatched the beast and saved the tiny animal. "Thank you," panted the mouse, and the Scarecrow and Tin Man learned that she was the queen of the field mice. In return for saving her life, she called upon her armies of mice to carry the sleeping Dorothy, Toto, and Lion from the deadly field. Soon the foursome was back on the yellow brick road. They saw a beautiful green glow on the horizon. "Look, that must be the Emerald City," said Dorothy. Before long, they came to the great wall that surrounded the city. At the door stood a man clothed all in green from his head to his feet. Dorothy explained why they had come. "I am the guardian of the gates," said the man in green, "and you must see the great Oz. I will take you to his palace, but first you must put on these spectacles, for the brightness and glory of the Emerald City would blind you." Taking a big golden key from a peg on the wall, he opened another gate, and they followed him through into the Emerald City. Everything was green here. The houses were green, the fences were green, and even the people they saw were all dressed in clothing of a lovely emerald green. Dorothy and her friends each imagined what they would say when they spoke to the great wizard. At the Palace of Oz, a tall soldier all dressed in green greeted them. "Please make yourselves comfortable while I go to the door of the throne room and tell Oz you are here." They had to wait a long time before the soldier returned. "I have spoken to the great Oz. He will see you one at a time," pronounced the stern soldier. Each of the travelers entered the throne room separately to meet the wizard. Each time the wizard took a different shape. Dorothy saw an enormous head without a body to support it. The Scarecrow met with a most lovely lady who had gorgeous wings and a crown upon her head. The Tin Man witnessed a dreadful-looking beast with a head like that of a rhinoceros and 5 eyes in its face instead of 2. To the lion's surprise, he met a giant ball of fire so fierce and glowing he could scarcely bear to gaze upon it. Each time the wizard proclaimed,
"I am Oz, the great and terrible. Kill the wicked witch of the West, and I will grant your wishes."
When the friends were together again, they despaired that they had to kill the wicked witch of the West. They decided to set out at once and returned to the guardian of the gates. "Which road leads to the wicked witch of the West?" asked Dorothy. "There is no road," he answered solemnly. "No one ever wishes to go that way." "How then are we to find her?" inquired the girl. "That will be easy," replied the man. "Keep heading west toward the setting sun. When you reach the country of the Winkies, the witch will find you. Take care, for she is wicked and fierce." Now the Wicked Witch of the West had but one good eye, but it was as powerful as a telescope and could see everywhere. She saw Dorothy and her friends coming from many miles away and was angry to find them in her country, so she called upon her armies to attack. First, a horde of great wolves attacked, but the Tin Man swung his great axe and chopped off their heads one by one. Next, a flock of crows arrived, darkening the sky with their black wings. "This is my battle," said the Scarecrow. "Lie down beside me and you will not be harmed." And the crows, being mightily afraid of him, flew away at once. Next, a swarm of giant bees buzzed toward them, but the friends all hid, except for the Tin Man. When the bees attacked him, they broke their stingers against his metal sides. Finally, the witch, in a great rage, sent the winged monkeys, which she controlled by wearing a marvelous golden cap. "Bring me the girl and the lion to be my slaves," she screamed, "and kill the others." This time there was no escape. Shouting and yelling, they threw the poor Scarecrow into a tree and dropped the Tin Man from a great height, smashing him to pieces. Then they grabbed Dorothy, Toto, and the lion and took them to the Wicked Witch's castle. When the witch saw the silver slippers on Dorothy's feet, she began to tremble with fear. But when she looked into the child's eyes, the witch saw that the little girl did not know of the wonderful power of the shoes, and the Wicked Witch laughed to herself. "Come with me," she said to Dorothy, "and see that you mind everything I say, for if you do not, I will kill you." Dorothy was forced to be a slave to the Wicked Witch, and life became very sad for her. Crying herself to sleep each night, she wished she was back with her friends or home with Aunt Em and Uncle Henry. Dorothy worked hard for the Wicked Witch, until one day the witch stole one of Dorothy's silver slippers. Dorothy became very angry and threw a bucket of dirty water at the witch, drenching her from head to foot. The witch gave a loud cry of fear, and then, as Dorothy watched in wonder, the witch melted into a puddle on the floor. The Winkies had been slaves to the Wicked Witch for many, many years, and there was great rejoicing when Dorothy set them free. Dorothy asked them to help find her friends. The Scarecrow was unstuck from his tree, the Tin Man was pieced back together, and the lion was freed from his chains. Soon they were reunited. For a few happy days, the friends stayed at the castle. Then Dorothy decided it was time to return to the Emerald City. "We must go back to Oz and make the wizard keep his promise." Dorothy remembered the witch's marvelous golden cap and, putting it on, summoned the winged monkeys. "If you don't mind," said the child, "we wish to go to the Emerald City."
"We will carry you there,"
replied the king of the monkeys. And as quickly as any bird flies, the friends were carried across the great land of Oz, straight to the gates of the Emerald City. An old soldier with majestic green whiskers took the 4 travelers directly to the throne room of the palace to see the wizard. They were all greatly surprised when they looked about the great room and saw no one at all. Toto sniffed around and tipped over a screen that stood in a corner of the room. Behind it was a little old man with a bald head and a wrinkled face, who seemed to be as surprised as they were. "No one knows it," said the little man in a trembling voice, "but I am Oz, the great and terrible." He told them of how he accidentally arrived in the strange, beautiful country by balloon many years ago. I found myself in the midst of a people who, seeing me come from the clouds, thought I was a great wizard. You must keep your promises to us, exclaimed Dorothy. While the wizard couldn't really do any magic, he tried his best to give Dorothy's companions what they most dearly desired. I have come for brains, remarked the Scarecrow a little uneasily. Oh, yes, sit down in that chair, please. Then Oz poured the new brains into the Scarecrow's head, which were a mixture of bran and pins and needles. How do you feel? Asked Dorothy. I feel wise indeed, the Scarecrow answered earnestly. Why are those needles and pins sticking out of your head? Asked the Tin Man.
That is proof that he is sharp,
remarked the Lion. The wizard then gave the Tin Man a pretty sewn heart, made entirely of silk and stuffed with sawdust. I'm very grateful to you, and shall never forget your kindness, the Tin Man said, thanking the wizard. And finally the wizard went to a cupboard and took down a tiny bottle marked Liquid Courage. The Lion drank it quickly and in his deep, rich voice said,
Now I am full of courage.
The wizard said to Dorothy, I came to this country in a balloon. You also came through the air, carried by a cyclone. So I believe the best way to get home will be through the air. Now, while I cannot make a cyclone, I believe I can make a balloon. And soon the balloon was ready. The wizard climbed aboard and called to Dorothy to join him. But at that moment, Toto ran into the crowd. Dorothy chased after him. With a great snap, the lines holding the balloon gave way, and up and away the balloon flew. Come back, cried Dorothy. I want to go too. But it was too late. The balloon was gone. Dorothy wept bitterly at the loss of her ride home to Kansas. Is there no one who can help me? She asked, crying great salty tears. The old soldier from the palace thought deeply about the question, chewing on his big mustache. Glinda is the Good Witch of the South, he said finally. She is the most powerful of all the witches and rules over the Quadlings. Surely she will be able to help you. And so the next morning the travelers set off once again. Before long they came to a dark wood. When the Scarecrow tried to enter, branches from the trees bent down and wrapped around him.
The trees seem to have made up their minds to stop our journey,
remarked the Lion. The Tin Man shouldered his axe and marched up to the first tree. He chopped at it so fiercely that he cut it cleanly in two. Come on, the Tin Man shouted to the others. Be quick! And they hurried past the fighting trees. Before long they came upon a gathering of many wild animals, tigers and elephants and bears and foxes and every other type of creature.
What is your trouble?
The Lion quietly asked a large tiger. We are threatened by a great spider that has come into the forest, answered the tiger. Being full of courage, the Lion asked,
If I put an end to your enemy, will you make me king of the forest?
We will, the other beasts roared. The monster was lying asleep when the Lion found him. It had an enormous mouth with a row of sharp teeth a foot long. The Lion leapt and landed upon the monster's back. With a mighty blow of his sharp claws, the Lion knocked the spider's head from its body. The Lion went back to where the beasts of the forest were waiting for him and said proudly,
You need fear your enemy no longer.
Then the beasts bowed down to the Lion as their king, and he promised to come back and rule over them as soon as Dorothy was safely on her way to Kansas. When at last the travelers emerged from the forest's gloom, they came upon a steep hill covered from top to bottom with great pieces of sharp rock. Call the winged monkeys, suggested the Tin Man. They can fly us over. Dorothy put on the golden cap, and soon the winged monkeys appeared to carry Dorothy and her comrades safely over the hill, setting them down in the beautiful country of the Quadlings. They walked by the fields and across the pretty bridges until they saw before them a very beautiful castle. 3 young girls were standing at the gates, dressed in handsome red uniforms. They followed the girls into a big room, where the good witch Glinda sat upon a throne of rubies. Dorothy told the witch her whole story, how the cyclone had brought her to the land of Oz, how she had found her companions, and of the wonderful adventures they had had. "The silver slippers have wonderful powers," replied Glinda. "Had you known their power, you could have gone back to your Aunt Em the very first day you came to this country." "If that is so," said the child joyfully, "I will ask them to carry me back to Kansas at once." She threw her arms around the Lion, Tin Man, and Scarecrow, and found herself crying at this sorrowful parting from her loving comrades. Dorothy took Toto up solemnly in her arms, and having said one last goodbye, she clapped the heels of her shoes together 3 times. Instantly she was whirling through the air so swiftly that all she could feel was the wind whistling past her. Dorothy stopped so suddenly that she rolled over several times before she knew where she was. Dorothy sat up and looked about her. "Good gracious!" she cried, for she was sitting on the broad Kansas prairie, and just before her was a new farmhouse that Uncle Henry must have built after the cyclone had carried away the old one. Dorothy saw Aunt Em and went running toward her. "My darling child!" Aunt Em cried, folding the little girl in her arms and covering her face with kisses. "Where in the world did you come from?" "From the land of Oz," said Dorothy gravely. "And here is Toto, too. And oh, Aunt Em, I'm so glad to be at home again."